Monopolies are usually the result of a lack of alternative, which translate into accepting what is being offered. This comes with all the side effects: lack of quality, lack of transparency, lack of accountability, and also a lack of a desire to upgrade and constantly seek enhancement. What is being offered is the only option on the table. You either take it or you leave it. This is not only in consumer goods and services, but it is also found in everything around us, from goods, services, economies, even in politics. This is why competition has always been perceived as the ingredient for distinction, for doing better, for offering better quality with competitive cost. It's not a luxury. Competition is a necessity in all walks of life, because if the ecosystem is based on this fact, then one can bet on the fact that the pursuit of excellence is the end game. Without this, there will be no survival in markets, economies, and even in politics. Good evening. You're watching the Business Insider here on Nile TV International, and I'm Ayman Salah. Our weekly program tackles events affecting economies and business, and we aim to bring you the inside story. Welcome back. Let's start with the first news item for the week. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi inaugurated the Higher Education Global Forum, known as the ISESCO General Conference. Egypt is hosting the organization's General Conference for the first time in the new administrative capital. The head of state attended the morning session of the Global Forum that gathers a number of international universities and organizations. He called for an active participation by renowned universities across the world to raise the level of education offered in the Arab world so as to qualify students for future jobs and build sustainable partnerships with large economic, industrial, and technological institutions locally and internationally. The second news item we have for you this week is that the Sovereign Fund of Egypt is considering issuing green bonds. This follows the successful sovereign and corporate bond sales in the country over the past year. Meanwhile, the government is expected to introduce next March a stimulus package to aid Egypt's transition to a green economy. The measures will be announced during budget season ahead of the new fiscal year and will offer targeted financial incentives to encourage sustainable and carbon emission reducing projects. Coming up next is the Global Gateway Scheme with my honorable guest, His Excellency Ambassador Raouf Saad, the former Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs and former Chairman of the National Bureau for Egypt-EU Association Agreement. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Business Insider. Today's topic is the Global Gateway, the EU's Global Gateway. I have the pleasure to be joined by His Excellency Ambassador Raouf Saad, the former Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs and the former Chairman of the National Bureau for the Egypt-EU Association Agreement. A pleasure having you on the show.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you very much.
Tonight. All right, so the Global Gateway Scheme was announced last week, last Wednesday. Let's watch this report and then start our discussion.
The EU unveiled a project last week which is foreseen to disburse hundreds of billions of euros through an ambitious infrastructure investment program. The Global Gateway, a €300 billion infrastructure spending plan, aims to boost EU supply chain and trade across the world. The European Commission's press release unveiled details of the new initiative on Wednesday in what they described as an ushering in a more competitive era in development aid. The recipient countries will now have an alternative to other financing. Brussels hopes to focus on the European ways of doing business, starting with the nature of funding. It comes to the table with financing that is favorable and transparent, especially to developing countries. It also insists on financing that is based on values such as transparency, respect for law, and local working conditions. Finally, the Global Gateway aims to focus on investment in future-oriented, environmentally responsible projects in the digital, health, renewable energy, and other sectors. Some critics may view the EU's initiative as a little too late. However, the European attempt to sell the Global Gateway comes at the best time for countries seeking alternatives to other sources of funding, since the program can offer borrowing countries an additional card during their negotiations with other counterparts and can try to obtain better conditions by threatening to choose European financing. One of the most important tests of the effectiveness of the European program will be Africa, which should be one of the main beneficiaries of these investments, since many European companies have been outrun by competitors and lost market share. The Global Gateway has competitors such as the US and China. The US had announced its initiative Build Back Better World back in June in the G7 summit, and China has its Belt and Road Initiative revived since a decade. At this stage, it is important for Europe to have its own agenda and compete with both at a time when many countries are seeking preferential terms in their rebuilding efforts and projects.
All right, so the Global Gateway Scheme, the EU's Global Gateway Scheme, is our topic tonight. With me is His Excellency Ambassador Raouf Saad, former Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs and former Chairman of the National Bureau for Egypt-EU Association Agreement. Once again, a real pleasure having you on the show here tonight. What, in your view, does this initiative achieve?
Well, first, thank you very much for hosting me tonight after quite a few number of years. It's a pleasure to be with you and with the Nile TV. Well, I believe that this initiative should be considered one of the major initiatives that has been taken by the EU, and it should be appreciated from the circumstances where it's born within. I think that in order to appreciate it rather correctly, you have to look around the international situation, the changes of balances of powers, the changes in the international system, the crises which the EU has passed through. And this comes as, it's within a chain of previous initiatives that have been taken by the European Union at a time where some observers expected that the EU could be disintegrated due to the Brexit, then COVID, and before that, the financial crisis. And surprisingly to all experts and all observers, and with the new commission, whose president is a German, started and launched three major initiatives. One is digitalization or digital transformation. Second, on the Green Deal. Third, a special strategy for Africa. I mean, these initiatives, I believe that they will be, encompassed in the Global Gateway, because they are driven by a new consideration of the EU of its position in the world, take into consideration not only the crises, but also that the EU was able to endure all these crises and came out rather successfully. And the international relations is witnessing different balances of powers, not only between the old powers, but even within allies. Just to give one example. If you remember that the EU signed an agreement with China on trade and investment just a few days before President Biden took his office. So that means that that the allies relationship are not in accordance with the standard relationship, let alone that China is imposing a new challenge for both. So I think the EU now is emerging or re-emerging as a new power that would like to play a new role. And here it's very important that for us, for Egypt and for other countries, that it should not be satisfied by watching or anticipating or waiting. We have to seize the opportunity rather speedily, because the opportunities that are offered by this initiative are really making the future. And in a country like Egypt, where I think we are on the verge of having a renaissance. I mean, the country is being rebuilt, right. the Egyptian citizen is being rebuilt altogether. We have to seize this opportunity because they care about us. I mean,
before getting into that, let me just ask you, would you perceive this initiative as molding, the EU molding its external economic relations with its image? Because you mentioned a signing of an agreement with China right before Biden took office in the United States. The rise of the European Union after several crises, as you have mentioned. Do you perceive this as an image tackling event, or this is good for European business?
It is, in my view, it's purely interest-driven. I mean, for not only the image is very much connected with the implication, with the role.
Right.
And they are looking for a new role, and particularly in two areas, Middle East, Mediterranean, and Africa. And that's why we should be very much involved. If you look at some of the details of this initiative, you'll find that for the first time that the EU is launching this strategy within a new combination of factors or players. For the first time, we see that the EU is presenting this initiative as a result of a combination between or among the Brussels institutions, the Commission and External Services, the EU financial institutions, the EIB and EBRD, and the collective role of the member countries. So that's why you can feel that this is a kind of unanimous strategy approved by all the countries.
By the Council.
Sorry?
By the Council.
I mean, the Council is the institution, but I'm talking about more about the member countries, because it's not easy to get a kind of a unanimity of decision among the EU members. But in this particular case, you should just take note of this kind of development, which reflects very much the interest of the EU in order to pursue and promote and elevate even its role and its interest, particularly in the neighborhood. And by the way, with the new Commission established a new mechanism for the neighborhood. Neighborhood for the EU is not just a slogan. It is, for them, since even the two World Wars that took place in Europe, neighborhood is, they care about the stability about the neighborhood. And stability for them is development, prosperity, and peace in the regions. And that's why I think it reminds me that you can look at this initiative as rather equal to Barcelona Declaration. Right. Barcelona Declaration was launched in 1995, and after 5 years of peace negotiations in anticipation of peace, since Madrid process in 1991. They launched the Barcelona process, which was not just, as people think, it's association agreements. It was eco-political process that would engage the EU in the Middle East in order to promote its own interests. And, their interest is in peace in the region. But this one is,
It's more enlarged, because here you're not talking the Middle East, you're talking, of course, the developing countries, if you will,
yes,
throughout the world.
But they mentioned, they referred in particular to the neighboring countries, but
And Africa.
And Africa. And that's why I think, the new initiative is not separate from the three preceding initiatives that I have just mentioned.
Madrid and Barcelona.
No, I mean the three ones, that in 2019, just in the middle of the COVID, they launched the three strategies, the Africa, the digitalization, and Green Deal. It is, I think, if you want to see how that would relate to Egypt, they strongly believe, regardless of, we have differences, by the way, I mean, and which is only normal among partners. It's only normal to have differences. But for them, with the developments that have taken and continue to take place in the region, right, with that a crisis, that continue to take place in the region, the EU would consider that Egypt among the prior partners that they should engage with and promote the relations. And that's why association agreement, it's not a matter of only trade. Trade is just, a part of the association agreement, because the association agreement includes so many areas: political, legal. We are talking about terrorism, migration. I mean, it involves. And if time allows, I think I had the honor to negotiate, a new important development in the association agreement, that we moved from identical plan of action that was for all Mediterranean countries to priorities. That would, the relationship between EU and Egypt would be tailor-made. That would take, into consideration the priorities of Egypt.
Here you're talking about the association agreement.
Yes,
that,
right. And that's why it's now, they are talking about, if you look at the initiative, they are talking about, take into consideration the priorities of the countries.
And here, on that note, one of the things, the slogan in Brussels is building links, not dependencies. That's the slogan, building links, not dependencies. Is this achievable through this scheme? If we go back to the Global Gateway Scheme, the $300 billion investments, is this achievable?
I think you can take it, if I don't want to oversimplify, but the $300 billion, I would take it like a seed money, a seed investment.
Right.
And here we have to remember, this is not assistance. It's not assistance.
Investments.
It's investments. And this is one of the most important issues, even for Egypt, right? Because we have to promote our investment opportunities, and we have a lot, but it depends, the way you promote them, we need a lot of reforms, whether we are talking about legislation, we're talking about,
But
management.
you also have a situation in Europe whereby there's a slowdown, an economic slowdown, and they need investment opportunities. Where can they find these investment opportunities? In countries like developing countries?
Well, they know that, for example, if you take the case of Egypt, there are a lot of opportunities. One major opportunity is the economic zone in Suez Canal, because as some people know, they, during the peace process, that I've just referred to, it was the EU which proposed to establish a regional hub in the Suez Canal. And that, because the Suez Canal for the EU is, not only that you come to Egypt, but it's from this hub.
It's a launching pad.
From this hub, you go to East Africa, you go to South Asia, and to the Gulf. So you change the whole trade map altogether. So that's why, if you just give me 1 minute to talk about Africa, I think since President Sisi assumed the presidency of the AU in 2019, African Union, I believe that was a kind of re-entry to Africa. Egypt is re-entering Africa of course, with a different image, but with a different calculated approach that is based on mutual benefits, on interest. And I'm convinced that we have a good opportunity to launch a kind of trilateral, cooperation: EU, Egypt, Africa. I think you go to Africa with two hats, with the EU hat, with the business lines, with the investments, with the technology, and with Egypt, with the expertise, with the experience, and with the interest that they can lend or export to Africa. For example, the experience of the economic reform is such a good experience that you can just export to Africa. So I believe this new initiative by EU should encourage us to consider, launching a new kind of sub strategy coming from this global new one, in order to engage the Europeans more into the areas of interest of Egypt, but for example, digitalization and the climate change, the Green Deal,
transport, health, education, and
research. For example, for the benefit of those who are watching, they have the largest research pool in the world. And it used to be called Horizon, and it's the pool of all research activities in all the 27 countries, and it's open to the partner countries or the neighboring countries like Egypt. Well, we are taking part in the projects, but we are trying to. We hope. That we become members, because if you become a member, then you will have an
accessibility to all the researchers,
to even designing the programs and activities. So I see the potentialities of cooperation with Europe as rather unique in its nature and its quality. And it is, it has a built-in guarantees, for stability, that it has this kind of the quality that you can continue to cooperate while you can differ on other issues like, human rights, whatever.
6 basic principles will be guiding the investments, the Global Gateway Scheme investments. 1 is democratic values and high standards. 2, good governance and transparency. 3, equal partnerships. 4, green and clean. 5, security focused. And 6, catalyzing private sector investments. Won't those principles need to be instilled in developing economies so as to be viable? Meaning, to some, they might think that there are strings attached.
Conditions
attached to the investments, while the slogan in Brussels is building links, not dependencies. So, can developing countries meet the EU requirements and abide by them?
Well, let's be a little bit frank on this. I'm not suggesting that these are slogans, but they will have to put these kind of principles, you know, in order to maintain the character of the EU, with the value system of the EU, which is required by the European Parliament, by the member countries' parliaments, by the public opinion. This is part of their philosophy. And they will have to make that a kind of umbrella for all kind of cooperation. If you are talking about good governance, if you look at the definition of good governance in the EU, it includes human rights, rule of law, so on and so forth. So they will have to put it this way. But this, if you merge this kind of principles, as you correctly mentioned, with their interest, you'll find that there is always, you know, a kind of new product that is born out of this merge, right? For example, these are not new ones. I mean, they have been there since we started. And nevertheless, we continued our cooperation, we expanded our cooperation. For example, the trade volume between Egypt and EU is 30 billion euros. So in spite of the differences we have on the definition, not on the principle itself. We differ on what do you mean by human rights and how to respect human rights. And, you know, you cannot just compare between the situation in Europe and us.
Education is a human right, security is a human right.
Exactly. But if, for example, I'll give you a very quick example. If you are talking about, you have some discussions on these kind of principles, and you look at the Forum of Natural Gas, right?
The Mediterranean Forum.
And this is crucial for them. Right, because it was established at a time that it's in the neighboring region, and at a time that EU, due to other political problems with other countries, they are diversifying their sources of energy, right? And you are just providing them with a close source of natural gas, which
a close alternative.
Alternative and stable, because with the kind of discoveries, you know, that have been found in Egypt and other, even the countries of the East Mediterranean, you have established a stable source of energy, plus that according to their strategy on Green Deal, in 2130, we should have 50% carbon neutrality. And 2150 should be 100% carbon neutrality. So this is a very important period for them to use the natural gas. It is a fossil oil, by the way. It's not. It's a clean fossil oil. So it's very much needed at this stage. So, I mean, what I'm talking about, that pragmatism would apply, you know, in a way. And we are getting closer. I mean, with the kind of developments taking, for example, in Egypt. With the,
and also, you have an issue currently, which is the EU is faced with competition. Competition from China, competition from the United States, targeting a continent, Africa, for example. So this basically provides lucrative and growing investment opportunities for European companies, because one of the main targets is to promote private sector investments.
Very much correct. I mean, what you're suggesting, of course, and you know, that is very much a kind of interpretation of what I've mentioned at the beginning, that, you know, the balances of powers are different, you know, the relationship, and with new challenges. I mean, if you want to, of course, China is the challenge, but it's not only, that's not the only player. You have India, you have Brazil, you have, you know, so many other countries that are emerging, and a lot of players, right? And but the advantage the EU has, this kind of neighborhood relationship.
Right.
This is the only case in the world where you have this kind of neighborhood policy.
So you predict a success for this Global Gateway scheme. However, you perceive the amount as seed money.
Well, yes, but that we should not, I cannot just qualify it as a success for the EU if we are properly engaged, right, in this initiative. It could become a success for both of us, all right, for the EU and for us.
So we need to capitalize on it.
Very much so. And, you know, I think it's a very calculated initiative, and it would, you know, one of the main things that they are ready to support is that, you know, how to continue that economic reform. And they are offering, you know, their know-how. For example, now we are, at the time when I was still there, I mean, how to promote car industry, right? And of course, they are very much tempted by the initiatives that have been taken by Egypt, you know, in order to manufacture electric cars, right? And so I think a success will never take place unless, you know, it's perceived correctly by the receiving countries, if you want, and that, if you're talking about, it is rather late and small, with the partners would become a big and timely.
Coming from the former chairman of the National Bureau for Egypt-EU Association Agreement, this is valuable advice for both the recipients and for the investors, if you will. Your Excellency Ambassador Raouf Saad, former Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs and former Chairman of the National Bureau for Egypt-EU Association Agreement, always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ayman. You know, we are, it's a pleasure always just to be with you, with the kind of knowledge, with your, you know, the time you allocate for economic issues, which is not always popular, but thank you very much, because it's an honor and pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much for being with me and for accepting the invitation. It was a pleasure having you. Pleasure being with you here tonight. I'm Ayman Salah. See you same time next week. Good night.